welcome to The Stump, a show where we discuss forestry, careers, and other topics about. Oh my goodness. I'm trying to like do this new little thing, and this is, I'm just going to let this roll as it goes. It shows you how it's real. Um, Trying this whole new little teleprompter kind of setup, and man, I must have set things up bad because I repeat myself like three times here. Anyway, in a show that we talk about just about anything else on my mind, and I'm your host, Matt Comiskey. And today we welcome back Blake Manley of Manley Jobs. So, welcome, Blake.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me back.
Hey, love to do it. I think you and I have been talking. This might become a little bit more of a regular event, and because there's lots of good things going on out there in the workforce development and forestry world. And the more that we can get that spread out, and if nothing else, just connect some of the islands of workforce development that are going on around the Pacific Northwest, I think would be great. I know you had kind of a little bit of a rollout of something, but you got lots. What's going on right now? Because I've seen videos posted to, people need to go check out your YouTube, LinkedIn, TikTok. You're everywhere. So what's going on?
Well, that's the goal, right? That's the goal is to uh, physically, I don't want to be everywhere, but yeah, just trying to get people aware of all the great possibilities that are in the forest sector right now. Um, I think there's some momentum with the executive orders. You talked about that on one of your last podcasts. Executive orders that came out from the presidential, from the federal level, saying we're going to do more. The tariffs, we don't know what all that's going to bring. Everyone's kind of sorting through that. But yesterday, the Department of Agriculture, have you seen the new directive?
Well, that's the interesting thing. The new memo. I was in the
Yes.
middle of doing a radio show out in Aberdeen, Washington, when that rolled across my email notifications this morning. I'm still kind of digging through it because, as days go, the memo comes out. I'm in the middle of a radio show. Then I've got legislative meetings, and then a meeting with one of my day job members. Prepare for a meeting we're doing at the end of the month. So after this, I'm going to go read the memo. But
It's a
the
fire hose right now. It's an absolute like the changes and thing and the movement, how quick things are happening, and that can be good and bad, and I totally understand that for a lot of reasons. But part of that memo is that we have 66 million, according to the 23 wildfire assessment, right? The 66 million, 67 million acres that are under very high or high threat, and that's what they want to target with the executive order of increasing timber production. They don't want to just do it anywhere. They want to target those acres. Okay, great. I'm all on board for that. However, and this is the rabbit hole I've fallen into over the last month or so, how do we do it? Like, great. Let's get it all going. How do we actually do it? I was talking to a forester, what's his title? Doesn't matter. A forester down in for the Willamette National Forest, and he said on the shelf, he's like, we've got millions of board feet, tens of millions of board feet of sales ready on the shelf. We just need green lights, and then we need people to administer them and do them. And then where do they go? So on in the west, and I'm saying like the west, your west of the Cascades, I think there's milling capacity that could handle more national forest stuff. I talked to a mill, and I won't mention names, but I talked to a mill east of the Cascades that may not accept a log until July 1 because they're already full. Their capacity exceedeth. So then a lot of national forests this side of the Cascades, what do we do? And so then I start asking the question. You know me, I start digging and asking the question. Okay, so where are we at? The figures that have kind of been presented to me is we're somewhere in that 75%-ish of milling capacity across the West. So without adding any more actual mill infrastructure, we could increase capacity about 25%. And where that's coming from, Matt, is one of the mills I work with, they're running one shift, not two. Right? I mean, okay. Well, a couple of the mills, they're running a 1.5 shift, so they're only running the planer, or they're only running the kilns, or they're only running something else on that half other. So they could increase. So without adding, that's one of the questions everyone's, where's it going to go? Without adding mills, if we had the workers and the logs, okay, it takes about 2,000 people, and this is rough, but it's a rough number for the entire West. About 2,000 people to make 1 billion board feet. So between milling, foresters, roads, your profession, well, your former profession, it counts, right?
Yeah, it does count.
But about 2,000 people to bring to pass 1 billion board feet of lumber output, not logs in, lumber out. So if Canada's imports slow down, which I think all the projections are that they will in some capacity, for every 1 billion board feet that we're not going to import, it takes about 2,000 more people to do the job. All right, so that's where my mind goes, is where are they going to come from? Well, I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
That's and no, you're exactly right. And I think it's interesting. I've been kind of picking up through the grapevine that, you know, inventories of logs on the west side are it depends on the sector of the milling infrastructure you're talking about. We're kind of starting to hear through the grapevine from the loggers that, some sectors are getting full. They don't want 75 loads a day. Maybe they want 20 loads a day. But then there's other sectors because of what's going on with, particularly the Washington State Department of Natural Resources program in Western Washington, where, we're kind of hand to mouth in some of those more niche type markets. So, yeah. And I even had a national forest on the west side reach out to me wanting to know how they can use these executive orders to maybe try to help some of those niche markets so that they can weather this storm and they're still there into the future. But you're right, it takes people, and the Western Washington, Western Oregon, in my mind, are they're blessed to have lots of milling infrastructure, but I'm guessing that we're still kind of a little shy on the logging and trucking infrastructure to get all that going. Plus, we have this other little weird thing right now with exports and changes in the Asian log market. So that's going to be an interesting nuance too to see how this goes. But regardless, you're right. We still need people to do all this work, and where are they all going to come from?
Had a colleague of mine say about we're losing about 6,000 loggers a year nationwide that are retiring, moving on, whatever. We're not filling those in. And I as I think about it locally for us, I'm like, yeah, that probably is pretty close. And we've come up with technological advances, right, to cover for some of that. Grapple carriages for one, the tethering, safer. You don't have choker setters on the ground. You don't have a chaser, right, for the steep slope stuff. So those have been advances to continue production with less bodies. But I think we hit a point where there's only so much we can do there, right? I mean, there comes a point where that's not going to get there. So I look at some of that and I'm like, okay, what are we doing? Well, we are increasing high school engagement. We we are. Some places better than others. But I was at the Intermountain Logging Conference, just got back from it this morning. And one of the loggers I talked to there lives up in Kettle Falls, Colville National Forest. I think if there's a blueprint, Matt, and correct me if you feel like maybe I'm off a little bit, right? But if there's a blueprint for a national forest right now, it's the Colville.
Oh, definitely.
120, they did 127 million board feet last year.
Yep.
Okay, that number one in the nation. If we had 6 or 7 other forests doing 127 million, that changes a lot of conversations. Um, but he doesn't have the guy I was talking to. He has one side. He says I could have three, but he says I can't find the workers for number two.
Yep.
So he was picking my brain. Who do I go to? And he's going to the local high school. I've told him for a couple of years go to local high school, but now he has the right teacher in place that he feels comfortable with, and that's good. That's fine. So he's in local high school, and now he's sitting there trying to pluck them out. And then he's at the conference, and I introduced him to a couple of my former students that I worked with at the university before I moved on. And I'm like, great operator, good kid, super reliable. And he started offering them jobs as well. And I'm like, great. Man, I honestly, I think it's like industry's right here and other things are right there and the bridge, right? I don't feel like we're very far apart, but we don't have the bridge, right? And jumping over that ravine is hard.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. And I think a lot of it is just one perception. One thing I often hear on this side of the mountains is, oh, logging's a dying industry. Why do you want to go into that? But it may be as far as pure number of jobs, a consolidating industry, but if nothing else, there's getting to be greater opportunity in you know,
I
op-
agree.
niche positions, and helping flag that for kids, especially coming out of high school, to me, I think is, helping kids just figure out how to even get to those jobs. I mean, that's, I see them posted on Facebook, but how many
Kids
kids
don't.
coming out of high school are on Facebook these days? I haven't run into too many jobs being posted on TikTok, but maybe there's an opportunity there. But yeah, I mean, it's like getting the word out and then, getting the training, because that's the other challenge I see is, you know, the days of having a toolbox full of some wrenches and some screwdrivers and being able to buy an old log truck and go to hauling and an old
Gone.
skidder are gone. And it's financing these operations. And I think, to me, that's one of the big things I see is we've got a couple of multi-generation loggers who are working on making that transition to the next generation, but I'm also seeing a lot of them just retiring, selling
Yeah,
off the equipment.
successional
um
planning has not been one of our strong suits, I would say, in the
so
industry. Yeah.
so to me, one thing is, I think it's really important, the type of work that you're doing and others, to get high school kids connected. And I mean, gee, we've got a great generation that's been playing video games, and most all this equipment these days is joysticks and buttons.
Screens
Yeah,
that you're manipulating.
yep,
Absolutely.
exactly. So I mean, they've already got a lot of the training done, but it seems to me like another angle is also just the economic viability and the financing. And one thing I've been thinking a lot about lately is how you get the business training side of it. So that yeah, 18-year-old kid comes out of high school, gets a job running a shovel, and maybe in 5 years he's like, what, I want to go start my own business. But we got to make sure that we've got some programs in place to help them understand how you finance and run a business like this.
Hey, how do you make a bid?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, simple it down. Man, I've been thinking about this a lot, too much lately, probably, right? And uh, I think I started in the woods 26 years ago. Okay, not bumper, that job's gone. Great entry level spot. You could give somebody a chainsaw. They weren't hurting your production. Too bad if they weren't keeping up, right? Choker setter. I started choker setting behind a D5 with a free spool winch. You're actually pulling the line off. Okay, gone. Most chasers don't exist. They've got the electronic chokers even now. So if you've got choker setters, once it hits the landing, they just hit the button and it opens the. So we got those were all entry level spots. They're gone now. So one, we can't. How do we get them there? And then two, what you're talking about, how do we get new people in and they're not going to go and take a 2 year or 4 year course at a university because they're 25, 20, like your example, 25, 26, 27. They've worked for a few years. We need the short courses on the timber industry economics, right? And how to do that. Um, I think there's some options out there. Buddy of mine ran a course in January, and it didn't go quite the way we had, planned it out in our head. You know how that goes,
Oh
right?
yeah.
But we started saying, okay, we want to keep doing this. That didn't work that way. That worked good this way. We need to target this audience for this. And I think more and more people are thinking about what you're thinking about and saying, we don't have that. Let's get that. One of the we don't haves is how do we we're talking encouraging into the industry, not just logging, but lumber milling, foresters, we're short in all those capacities, right? For the most part with foresters, we've got a pretty good plan of exposing kids, they're interested, we get them to college, we get them some experience, whether that's 2 year or 4 year, get them out in the industry. With logging, we have a couple of places. And what maybe or maybe not a boss of yours and I sat down and talked about over the week was with true logger training programs that are training entry level loggers, right? We have Shasta, the Hilo program, doing pretty good. North Maine Community College, that's quite a ways away. There's one in Alabama. Okay, that's not really on our doorstep. North Idaho College is starting one in June. They've got an apprenticeship, got all the paperwork in. It's going to be 4 weeks. They're going to get the safety and basic operations and then get them out there doing. Okay, that's great. Even at our colleges, locally, OSU has a student logging crew, mostly just for their foresters to get experience. And the U of I has a 2 year and a 4 year program. They've got their own equipment, experimental forest, all that. They're getting some. Even if every kid that I interacted with on the university level came out into law, we're talking 4 or 5. We're not right. We're not talking 40. We're
Right.
we're probably 40 or 50 short this year regionally. And I'm saying regionally, the inland region. I'm not even counting Western Washington, Western Oregon, right? We're short. So even all those programs, we're short. We got to have more programming.
Yeah, no, definitely. And one thing, just kind of a little bit of a sidestep here. I was reading a book while I was on vacation, and thinking back that, well, there was a line in there that I've actually flagged it to go back to kind of talk a little bit more about at some point in the future. But loggers were one of the job classifications just what 3-4 years ago that was listed as one of the happiest, most satisfied groups
Yep.
out there in an employment survey.
Top two. Top
Right.
two.
Yeah.
Depending on who did the survey, it's either farmers or it's forestry workers. They
Yes.
count the loggers in with all that. They count your job. They count my job, right? I'm happy in what I do. But
Yep.
it don't matter who the survey is. Almost every single time I've seen that, farmers and forester workers.
Yep.
So we're the happiest and no one wants to do it. What the hell?
Yeah, well, I've got a whole list of ideas in my head of why people don't want to do it, but some of those we can't affect, some of them we can, and
Yep.
one of them is just, I think, getting people aware of the opportunities that are out there, and then like the program you just talked about, getting started in Idaho, giving them the opportunity to learn, because the reality is with current labor and industry and OSHA requirements and stuff, getting kids under 18 out there and exposed is nearly impossible. And if I own a $800,000 forwarder, I'm probably not going to let a 19-year-old kid who might barely even know how to drive a stick shift pickup truck to work get behind the controls. So,
Right.
we got to get those venues out there so that they get some hands-on seat time to understand what's going on, and even be able to do things like grease and lube the equipment at the end of the day.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. Hey, the letter that you got to dig into later, they're using I'm looking at it, the 23 wildfire hazard potential for the United States. That's where they're coming up with the acres. For the listeners out there that might want to look into this, 66.9 million acres are listed high or very high. And then the directive is the emergency situation determination under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So it's a Biden administration, the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, that they're using that power that was granted through that administration to now come back and say, here's the problem. We have 66 million acres that are going to burn up and kill us all. And like Travis Joseph says all the time, who you work with, Travis says it's massively harmful. All this smoke, we're finding the data now. It's so harmful. More harmful the more structures are involved, right? Because it's the
Oh
particulates
yeah.
in the area. It's bad.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
so it's not just a health. I mean, it's not just a trees burning up. It's a health issue. And I love that they're looking to tap into that infrastructure and jobs, because the Department of Labor secretary is Miss Lori Chavez DeRemer from Western Oregon, who deals with the logging side, the forestry side. But she was there in 2020 when I was living over there, and we had the Labor Day fires. Like she knows how catastrophic this is, and that it's a job issue. I love that there's a star there. There's a star there.
yeah. No, and I'll put a link to the press release and stuff around that memo in the show notes. And I think we're gonna see some challenges as well from the fact of, I see all the press releases about the staffing cuts at the Forest Service, and I was discussing that on the radio this morning. It's tragic anytime anybody has to go through a workforce reduction situation. I was in one of those cyclical downturns working for a large industrial landowner at one time in my career, and I always say it was the worst and the best thing that ever happened to me, because it did shift the trajectory of my career. But I think that it's also going to open up opportunities not only for people already in the profession, but people coming into the profession, because the reality is the Forest Service is going to have to change its business model. And I
Yep.
think anytime that there's the word, I guess the best word is disruption, um, to a sector there, that creates opportunity. And I think that we're going to see a lot of interesting opportunities come up, and time will tell. But yeah, it's connecting the dots and keeping all the fear mongers at bay, so that we can get work that's needed to be done accomplished, will be critical.
Yeah, I think so. And again, I want to use words from other people. They said that the dot between the top of the Forest Service right now, Chief Tom Schultz, who's I think a very intelligent man. I know him personally, and those that are on the very bottom of the Forest Service, some of those that got let go, some are new position, all that. There's a disconnect between those 2 points. We don't need to lay off all of the bottom and get rid of them. We need to get rid of some of the other pieces,
Yep.
to streamline some of those things. I just think it needs to be looked at like a business. And I understand that scares some people, but it's the truth.
Oh yeah. I mean, and it's and I think unfortunately some of what we saw in the early, I would say, missteps of how reductions in staff were handled, it was handled very much like, in my mind, a tech company. Well, I can always go find some new programmers. They're kind of that mindset of they're a dime a dozen. So I start at the bottom and work my way up. But in this situation, you can't just go find a new forester or a new biologist that's experienced in implementing forest practices. And that's to me where I think we really need to make the investments. Now, how, whether that's in bodies employed by the federal government or contractors, that's a whole other discussion. But to me, I think it does create an opportunity for, one, expanding that workforce, and two, maybe reforming the workforce to be a little bit more stable and a little bit more efficient in, I mean, because let's face it, Forest Service got record funding and we got less outputs. We got to do something so that record funding results in better outputs and at the end of the day, less smoke.
Yep.
And I
Yeah,
think,
I look at the Colville. Man, I just look at the Colville. I keep saying that. I think they've got a great plan. They partner with Boggin Brothers. They partner with local forestry companies. They do work themselves, and then all that funding that gets generated comes back into restoration work. They've replaced I don't know how many dozens of culverts that were fish barriers with beautiful bridges. They've replaced trails. They've done all this work that costs something to us, but they've replaced those things with money that they've generated, and they don't do massive 400-acre clear cuts, right? Most of it, you've been up there.
oh yeah,
You know much better than I do.
there,
It's
there's
mini projects.
I will say there are some long, narrow clear cuts, but that's because of the Forest Service trying to get ahead of some wildfires that were burning through the area. And it was their fuel breaks or trying to deal with, all of the hazard trees after the fire. But yeah, I mean, Northeast Washington to me is such a poster child of how things can work between, the cooperation between industry. I mean, yeah, you've got Vaughan who, kind of took the lead of diving into the A to Z project there. But, that project has kept Vaughan, kept Boise Cascade, kept Columbia Cedar, and then so it's kept that milling infrastructure alive. It's kept the logging and trucking infrastructure alive. And then you've got all the cascading economic benefits from, still got to have somebody there to change flat tires and put new tires on log trucks. And, somebody's got to be running the fuel station and all this kind of stuff. So it's to me, that is the poster child. And, I will give some of my Northwest Forest Plan forests a little bit of grace in that they do have a little bit more of a headache than the Colville does because they don't have that pesky spotted owl issue to deal with. But still, the fact of how much the Colville can do versus other forests that should be able to, even if they couldn't put out 120 million feet a year, they should be able to ramp. I mean, I've got one forest in Western Washington that I track that they had 3 sales they were going to do. They're now going to do one, and that one's being done by the state under a good neighbor authority. The other 2 sales maybe next year, and that's lack of qualified people willing to come to work for the Forest Service. And that was even before all these layoffs, before the pause, the hiring freeze. They weren't able to get people qualified to come even apply for the jobs that they have open. So, getting that filled is one critical need to get a lot of this stuff done.
Yeah, I agree. And I I'm going to say we're going to edge forward on that. My gut tells me that I've got no data to back that up, right? My gut tells me we're going to start edging forward on some of those type of people to get the job done. I think there's a lot of good people out there that are in forestry degrees now or that have them that have said, well, I don't want to work for the Forest Service because they don't get anything done. And if we can show them places like the Colville, if we can show them projects like the A to Z, we can show them stuff like that, and that other places are doing that, I actually think you'll get more wanting to be a part of that in a positive way. I just think we have to just show them, show them the good stuff that's going on.
Oh yeah. No, there are hundreds of extremely motivated, very qualified Forest Service field staff there that we need to get the bureaucracy out of their way so that they can go do the work. And I think you're right. That will then create a sense of, I mean, part of the Colville's success is leadership. People want to come work there. They do things. They feel supported. They have, from the previous forest supervisor to the current forest supervisor, there's that sense of, I don't know if I don't know if well, it might even almost be like a sense of family to a certain extent. And that creates a, a pull, a vacuum of people wanting to come and participate in that. So, um,
Pat McAfee, the Pat McAfee show all the time. I don't know if you watch sports or Pat McAfee. Every time something positive, they're like, all right, good job. Good. Well, this is me, that's us. We're like, Colville National Forest. Yeah, well done, guys.
yeah, no, and like I said, there's other forests that are trying. The Gifford Pinchot for one. That executive order came out, and it was, you know, I won't say it was hours, but it was days because they needed to kind of think about it and process it. But one of their key staff reached out to me instantly. Hey, Matt, can we get on the phone, talk about where the needs are? How do you think we can factor into this to help the industry? We know there's other challenges going on between, volume from the Labor Day fires going down, volume from the fires that we had here in Western Washington, Eastern Washington, and not to mention all the legal problems around DNR. And how can we factor in to keep that going, because we know we need the infrastructure long term just to keep essentially the status quo of the Forest Service healthy, the current forest. So I think that's all positive, and I think there's a lot of opportunity coming. But you've been giving me a few ideas as we've been talking here of things, but I know you've also been up to a lot because I keep seeing you all over the place, and got a lot of different ideas, projects in the air. So what else going on?
Well, a couple things we're doing. One of the newest initiatives that I'm a part of, it's called Workforce Unfiltered. It's ground level right now, but what I'm working on is I'm taking younger audiences, younger people that are actually doing work and getting them to support themselves by making little TikToks, Instagram reels, whatever that is, of their job and of a young person doing that. Far too often, we as a society, and I think this is, hey, all the way back to my grandpa's time, right? We look at that next generation, we're like, oh, they suck. They're they're no good, right? Well, I think unfortunately, we do the same thing. We kind of say, these kids coming out of high school, they don't know how to work, they don't know if they're good, right? Well, there are a whole bunch that are, and I've worked with them as both as an educator and as a professional. And the way I'm looking at it now is it's like a sluice box. If you've ever, you know, done any gold digging or watched it or whatnot, sluice box, you run a lot of material. Even back in the glory days of California gold rush, they run a lot of material through a sluice box for that little bit of gold that comes out. Right. Well, I think our workforce, young people workforce, the same way. So workforce unfiltered, that's kind of what we're looking at doing is, there's a whole lot of people out there graduating, working, all that, but there's a lot of gold dust in there. And if we can show that gold dust, maybe that narrative changes a little bit. So that's one of the things I'm working on. The other is I am heavily involved in the North Idaho College program. I'll be there every single day. It starts June 2nd. It's an apprenticeship program. So it's really one of the only, I think there's two actual apprenticeship programs in the nation for loggers. So it's one of very few programs, and they start on June 2nd. I'll be there every single day. So a logger, I still consider myself a logger, even though I'm removed a little bit. But a logger will be there every day, and then we're bringing in special guests at least 3 days a week to show them how they do it. So like I use this comparison all the time. Beautiful log truck behind me in my picture here, but I didn't load that. right? I've loaded 5 log trucks my entire life. That's just not something when I was in the industry that I did. So when we're talking about loading trucks, why would I be the one telling them how to do that? That's dumb. So I'm going to bring in the loggers. They're already going to volunteer their loader operators to come in. Maybe it's an afternoon. They come in at noon and they show the kids, yeah, this is how you do it, right? This is one butt back, one butt forward. You got to get them up on the side. You got to put the right, all that stuff. I don't need to teach them that. We want real loggers to do that. So that's the second thing. The third thing that I'm a part of, before I get there, have you seen Mike Albrecht's interview with Mike Rowe on the Mike Rowe podcast?
I have seen the first part of it, and then
It's long.
you sent me a message and said I got to watch the last 10 minutes. So I've watched the last 10 minutes, but it is on my list to get back to watching the middle part of it. So
700,000 views on YouTube. And most of the comments are positive. So that third thing that I'm working on is just maximum exposure to the positive aspects of the forestry industry. We have so much negative out there about us. And Matt, part of that we've earned. We just, I think, who said it? Don't remember. Somebody recently said, we have to accept that in the 50s, 60s, 70s, we didn't do forest practices the way we should have, right? We have to accept that. 1970s, 55 years ago,
no, yeah,
right?
don't remind me.
So, so you look at what's happened since 70, just 70, right? You have the Oregon Forest Practices Act, which was the first one, right? Washington has their Forest Practices Act. Idaho has one. California has, right? They all have governing bodies to make sure that we're doing it the right way, scientifically backed pieces. But we're still living with that negative message that maybe we earned a little bit, right? But that has just stuck with us in the 80s and the 90s and through today, right?
Yep.
So that message, we have to find a way to keep showing positive messaging, positive message. Lately, I've been doing a lot of stuff with your colleague Nick Smith on healthy forests, healthy communities. And what I've been trying to do is I try to get out with people of the community to say, what does a healthy forest mean to you? What does a healthy forest look like to you? And some of them I don't necessarily agree with their look of what a healthy forest looks like, but I think it's great perspective. That this is what a healthy forest looks like to the people of the inland forests. That's just where I've been able to get so far. And so that's the third thing, Yeah, we need training. Yeah, we definitely do. Yeah, we need positive messaging. Yeah, we definitely do. But overall, we just need to get out there and be part of the conversations. And sometimes we're not.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I sometimes feel like we can be our own worst enemy. I mean, let's face it, this is an industry, particularly here when I say, the Pacific Northwest, Washington, Idaho, Oregon, Montana, you know, uh, an area that was built by um, rugged individualists. And I feel like this is an industry that's been built by rugged individualists. I don't need my buddy down the street to get this done. I can do it myself. And I think to a certain extent, that has come back to bite us because that means we tend to keep our nose down and do our work and get things out there rather than getting out into that, broader public space to really share our message, tell our story. And I think you're right. I know one thing that I always try to, when I talk with people not familiar with the industry, is, I highlight how the industry has changed. You also have to, in my mind, put yourself back in the context of the time. The 50s and 60s, our society was coming out of, the ends of and the economic impacts of World War II. You had a booming, growing population that you had to house, and spreading. So and maybe yeah, by today's standards, practices back then weren't the most ecologically sound, but we need to put ourselves back in that mind. We shouldn't be judging by today's standards what was necessarily being done. We can admit that it may not have been done properly, but to say, to brand the whole industry as evil today based on the context of
Yep.
50, 60 years ago, to me is always rather frustrating. That but it also then allows us to show how our industry has evolved over that 50 or 60 years,
Yep.
to implementing science, doing things like, geez, I mean, probably 60% of my career before I started doing this policy stuff was fixing bad roads. And stuff that we would think was stupid to do today, but back then they thought, it was normal.
Yep.
Um, and so I think you're right. The more we can get out there, show that positive side, because, I still say most people, they don't ask me about forest certification. They ask me why 2x4s went up $2 last week. That's the general population question I usually get.
Yeah.
So, we need to be out there telling our story. I think you're right. The work I've seen you doing with, you know, healthy forests, healthy communities. I think I just saw you do something with We the Forest. Just getting that message out there, and there needs to be more of us doing it. I thank you for the hard work that you do doing it. And I know it's not easy. I have great aspirations of getting more videos and that kind of stuff recorded, but it is time consuming.
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah. A friend of mine, Julie Woodward, who works for OFRI, she said the other day, you're carrying a flag that not a lot of people are carrying, and the industry does appreciate that. And I understand that it ain't easy, but you know, this is my niche. And so I'm happy with that. Making videos, engaging, speaking, telling our story. If that's the way that I'm contributing, I guess that's the way I'm contributing.
Well, I happen to I know I'm probably biased, but I think you're doing a great job, a great service for the industry, and contributing. And it is always good. Today after the radio show I did, I got a text from the show host, and he had gotten a Facebook message that said, "Thank you for having him on the radio. He was a great speaker and great person to listen to." So, our message is getting out there. It's just we got to keep it going, and uh, recruiting more to the effort.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, in all aspects, right? Whether it's on the ground doing the jobs, or more guys like you and me that are doing this. I just encouraged a colleague here in Idaho to start a podcast because she said, I just don't hear it as often as I want. And then I referenced, the stump. This is a good one, right? I referenced Rupp's Timber Tutorials and Brian and the AFRC podcast. And she said, I've heard some of those, but she's like, I just want to do something a little different. And I was like, giddy up, because I don't hear very many women talking about our industry on podcasts or something like this. And I think we need that. So I
Yeah,
said, Shannon, go for it. Let's go. More the
yeah,
merrier.
no. If she needs any advice or help, feel free to send her my way. I'm happy to
Done.
share the learnings that I've done just trying to get this one started. And yeah, I'm trying to connect with Brian. Geographically, we've just been challenged trying to be in the same place. So, but no, I think it would actually be kind of fun to do a little bit of. I got to figure out the logistics and the technology, but. Kind of a joint.
Love it.
A few of the other podcasts I listen to outside of the forestry world do this from time to time. Of the they bring a whole host of people together and just kind of talk about the issues, and I think that would be kind of fun because, yeah, I mean, I bring Western Washington to it. You've got Jason Davenport brings, kind of the logger perspective to it. You bring the workforce development, Brian stuff, but I think, kind of blending all that together might actually be kind of interesting and fun.
I like that idea. I know we know we can connect all those dots. Let's do it.
Oh
Let's do it.
yeah, it's the technology of how do I make the video work and all that kind of
Sure,
stuff that
sure.
drives me nuts. But so, well, I'm assuming Workforce Unfiltered, you got website, or I mean, I've seen some stuff published on Facebook.
Facebook and TikTok right now. Nothing. TikToks. There's a few out there. I've got a group of younger folks under 25 because I think that's the audience we want to target. Um, they're working on making some videos, and then we're gonna do a big, huge splash here soon. All depends on what TikTok does.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I have this funny feeling that it won't go away, or if it does, there will be a successor very quickly.
Yep, yep, yep.
Um,
And I
that
know that I just look at it, Matt, this way. That is the number one or two spot where youth are getting their information. So I don't want to waste my time, and I don't mean that negatively, but I don't want to waste my time on something where we're not going to access that demographic. That's the one I want, is that under 25. And so right now the focus is TikTok. If TikTok has problems, then we'll shift that focus. But we're not going to do like you were saying, Manly Jobs, LinkedIn and Facebook, and I try to hit everything, right? And it's exhausting. This I'd like to be very focused and have those young creators, because I'm not going to be the one creating everything. Have those young creators create on a platform they want to.
Yep.
And I've threatened them with money, if they
Ooh.
actually make any money, if we actually make any money doing it, and I don't need the money, that's not it, right? But if Workforce Unfiltered takes off and there's actually, sponsorships or whatnot, I don't want it. I'm going to push it back onto those kids that are creating, and then I feel like that'll just storm out.
Yeah. So we got that because I want to make sure, I put this, makes it easy for anybody that, gets on the web to find all this stuff. So I can track all that. The North Idaho Apprentice Program.
Yep.
What's the easiest way to find that?
North Idaho College. You literally Google it. The easiest way that you can, North Idaho College Logging Apprenticeship Program.
Hey, that's easy enough for me to even remember.
Right, right. And it's a good, it's just like I said, they've got the information on there. Finalizing a couple details of how we're going to teach that, what we're going to focus on. North Idaho College has a really good heavy machinery program right now. So where we're going to start week one, we're just going to start with the safety and all that, but we're going to put them in a mini excavator or a skid steer because they already own that equipment. And all those controls, for those that may not know, all the controls of a mini X and a skid steer and that, those are all transferable to logging machinery today. It's all toggles. It's all screens and toggles now. So that's where you find that. Yeah, absolutely. And then Manly Jobs, like I said, it's everywhere, but the newest stuff and the best stuff is on YouTube right now, easily.
Okay.
We did two videos over the last month. One with Mark Mahon of Mahon Logging. He's the president of the Association of Loggers here in Idaho. We did a really good one, and they actually showed it on the Senate floor here in
Oh,
Idaho.
wow.
Yeah, on the Senate Ag Committee, I should say.
Okay.
And so it's all about salvaging burnt logs and doing it in a timely fashion. So really good video,
Oh, I
really
think
heartfelt.
I've already seen that one. I might have actually even shared a few clips of it to social media myself.
Good. It's good. It's good. And that's not me saying because I did it. The message Mark is portraying is so powerful and good. And
Yeah.
then the last video that we did, just sent it out last week. It's on YouTube also. It's with Radiator Supply House out of Sweet Home. And their story is very unique. And their average age is somewhere in that 36, 37, 38 years old in their facility. They have 70 employees. And while the rest of manufacturing and stuff is much older than that right now, why have they been in? Well, it's all in the video. You got to watch the video. But that story is very unique.
Okay. Well, cool. And then I also think I saw you and maybe one of your former colleagues, Ryer Becker,
Yep.
um, promoting something on Facebook. Is that the North Idaho thing? There was some kind of a job training thing and trying to help do some fundraising for it.
No, that's not. That's different. What one of the things that Ryer's doing is he has a simulator trailer. You know, it's exposure, right?
Right.
It's got that massive amount of exposure. He has two simulator trailers now at the University of Idaho that travel clear around the region. If it's outside the state, one of them is funded by a different source than the other. One of them has to stay in Idaho because it was paid for by Idaho dollars. So it travels. He is all over the place. And so he's trying to raise money just to keep doing that, right?
Okay.
And then the other is the Associated Logging Contractors of Idaho has a workforce development fund. You can find that several different places. On their website is one to contribute to that fund. And that fund is to fund me and those that I'm working with to go to. Our goal is to go to every single school district in Idaho within the next 18 months. We want to be a presence in every school district at some point within the next 18 months and just tell them logging is okay. We are doing it. And some of those places, it's a little farther than others to log. We understand that. Doesn't mean the kids shouldn't know about it.
Right.
And then the second piece to that is we need them trained up. And so once we've exposed them through job fairs and different things, then and just being in the classroom once in a while, then how do we train them up? And that training in the state of Idaho, in our region, there's only two sources right now. And it's either at the university, where it's a 2 or a 4 year program, which that fits a certain kid, or it's North Idaho College in their apprenticeship program. And so that's kind of what we're working on in that aspect.
Okay. So yeah, no, it was that the Association of
Logging contractors.
Logging Contractors, the one I was thinking of. So,
Good
well,
stuff.
cool. You're a busy man. How do you find time to like breathe, eat? Just
You know, hey, on the personal note, right? I don't fish as much as I should. I don't play golf anymore. And when we moved from Oregon to Idaho, we bought a house because it was the only thing on the market that was halfway reasonable in town on 5,700 square feet. Like not the house, but the whole lot.
right.
Well, I grew up on 9 acres. Dad has 40 something acres now. We were on a 100 acre tree farm in Sweet Home that I tended to, right? That was I don't have a release now, right? So now what do? I dive into work and I dive into doing stuff, and it's probably not healthy, Matt.
Well, yeah, no, I understand. I sometimes can get myself a little too mired down in the work stuff, but and
Look, I look outside today out my window and I say, "Hey, this looks like golf weather. I should be on the course today."
yeah, I'm not much of a golfer. So I'm one of those I count a good day of golf as ending with the same number of golf balls I start with.
Me too. Absolutely.
That to me. So I don't golf a whole lot, and I be honest with you, quit fishing when I was still a kid growing up in Seattle because, all the regulations and all that, it became basically the only time I could fish was, and you can't drive, so you can't drive anywhere. Yeah, when it was pouring down rain from the middle of November to the end of January, and it's kind of like, yeah, it's not a whole lot of fun. And and then they improved the local fishing area to make it nicer for the fishermen, which all they did was bring in a ton of riprap, so you tended to lose more fishing gear than you caught fish, and so I just kind of lost interest in it. So,
In the fall, I've started fishing out of my kayak for steelhead
oh,
and salmon.
mm-hmm,
Okay, that's fun. Now, and if I don't catch anything, I'm just trolling along and I'm in my kayak on the river, and maybe it's 70 degrees and I'm just paddling away. So my mind, it stops that constant noise and I enjoy it. I hooked a lot of fish that I didn't catch. because you're in a kayak. Stuff goes wrong, and if you go
Oh,
too wrong, you're in the river, right? So,
oh yeah, or if you're out in the ocean, what was that video I saw a while back? The poor kayaker got swallowed by the whale.
well, yeah, yeah. Or the great white. Hey, the guy getting chased by the great white the other day on his kayak. He was out a little ways, and all of a sudden he's like, "That's a great white." I'm
Yeah.
like, "Okay, that we don't get too many great whites in the clear water of the Snake River, so I should be okay."
Yeah, and if we do, we probably have much bigger problems to solve than whether or not we got kids going into the logging industry.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's true. That's true.
but well, hey, well, cool. Glad we could connect. Anything else you want to cover today, or
Nope, just push forward. For anybody that's listened to this, just realize that life's hard. Life's hard. Just in general, let's get out of the forestry realm. Life can be really, really hard sometimes, and you just got to push forward. And that's what we're doing in the industry. You and I, and many, many, many others, right? When it gets hard, you just got to keep pushing.
just got to keep putting one foot in front of the other, and sometimes you slide a little bit backwards, but you just got to keep moving forward. And yeah, I'll be over presenting to a loggers training on Monday about the public timber supply. So I might even see Ryer later in the day. I'm not sure if he's going to be virtual or showing up yet. So, but I always love those opportunities to get out and meet with the actual loggers and do some training and help them understand the bigger picture that sometimes we all get busy, and it's one thing to be running your logging side and whether or not you're always able to keep up with all the policy stuff that's going on around you. I always like being able to get over and help educate them on that.
Yep, yep. They don't have time.
No, it's it's a challenge, but so it's always good. Well, hey, thank you. Let's make sure that we kind of keep doing these on a regular basis, keep updating folks, and it's a hot topic everywhere. So
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate
you,
it.
you're welcome. We'll be in touch.